They say history is written by the conquerors, but there are some stories too grand, too powerful to be buried forever. This is one of them, a story not of slavery or colonization, but of gold, knowledge, and glory. A time when Africa didn't just compete with the rest of the world, it outshined it. This is the story of the Mali Empire, the African empire that was once richer than all of Europe combined. Our journey begins in West Africa, nearly 800 years ago, when Europe was still crawling out of the Dark Ages. While many Europeans lived in mud huts and warred over crumbling kingdoms, a mighty civilization was rising along the Niger River, a land so vast, so wealthy, so culturally advanced that its fame would reach the corners of the known world. This was Mali, and at its peak, it was one of the greatest empires in human history. The Mali Empire rose in the 13th century, after the decline of another African powerhouse, the Ghana Empire. The story of Mali begins with a legend. A boy born crippled and cast aside rose to become one of the greatest rulers Africa has ever known. His name was Sundiata Keita, the Lion King of Mali. Through strength, wisdom, and diplomacy, Sundiata united fragmented Mande tribes into a single powerful kingdom, and he laid the foundations for an empire that would dominate West Africa for centuries. By the 14th century, Mali was a sprawling empire, covering parts of today's Mali, Senegal, Niger, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and beyond. But what made Mali truly stand out was its wealth built on gold. At the time, West Africa was the world's largest supplier of gold. Nearly two-thirds of the global supply came from this region, and Mali sat right on top of it. Gold dust was so common in Mali that people traded with it in everyday markets, but they weren't reckless with it. The empire had strong trade policies, protected trade routes, and organized markets. Alongside gold came salt, ivory, cola nuts, copper, and slaves. Camel caravans stretched across the Sahara, connecting Mali to North Africa, the Middle East, and even Europe. But Mali's riches were not just in material goods. It was also a beacon of learning and culture. The city of Timbuktu became a legendary center of knowledge. At its peak, it housed over 180 Quranic schools and universities, drawing scholars from across the Islamic world. Its libraries held hundreds of thousands of handwritten manuscripts on subjects like astronomy, medicine, mathematics, law, and literature. In a time when Europe was still burning books and persecuting scientists, African scholars were debating philosophy under desert stars. Then came the man whose name would forever change how the world saw Africa, Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa became emperor of Mali in 1312. His reign would go down in history not only as Mali's golden age, but as a global turning point. He is widely regarded as the richest man who ever lived, not just in Africa, not just in his time, in all of history. Modern estimates put his net worth at over $400 billion adjusted for inflation. That's more than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates combined. But Mansa Musa wasn't just rich. He was also deeply devout, and in 1324, he made a pilgrimage to Mecca. That journey would shock the world. He didn't go alone. He traveled with a caravan of 60,000 people, soldiers, slaves, courtiers, and servants. He brought 80 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold. As he moved through Egypt and the Middle East, he handed out so much gold that it caused a massive economic collapse in Cairo. The value of gold plummeted and took over a decade to recover. This was the first time many people in the Middle East and Europe had ever heard of Mali, and they would never forget it. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage was more than a religious journey. It was a diplomatic mission. He built alliances, funded mosques and universities, and recruited architects and scholars. When he returned to Mali, he brought with him Arab architects who built mosques, libraries, and palaces. One of the most famous is the Jingarere Mosque in Timbuktu, still standing today. Under Mansa Musa, Mali became a global superpower, wealthy, respected, and admired. But as with all empires, time would eventually take its toll. After Mansa Musa's death, Mali began to decline. Internal power struggles weakened the empire. New kingdoms rose, such as the Songhai Empire, which would later surpass Mali in size and military strength. By the 16th century, the glory of Mali had faded, and European colonization was beginning to creep into West Africa. The once great empire was reduced to scattered territories, swallowed by time and silence. But why don't we learn about this in school? Why is the story of one of the richest empires in human history, an African empire, left out of most history books? The answer is uncomfortable. European colonial powers rewrote African history to fit their narrative. They portrayed Africa as a land without civilization before colonization. They erased stories of powerful African empires, thriving cities, and global influence. Mali didn't fit into their version of history, so they buried it. But the legacy of Mali cannot be erased. Its manuscripts still sit in the libraries of Timbuktu, some hidden during times of conflict, others damaged by time and fire. Scholars are now working to digitize and preserve them. They contain ancient African knowledge, passed down, handwritten by African scholars centuries before the printing press. The ruins of great cities like Niani and Gao still whisper of past glory. The trade routes once used by camel caravans have become highways for modern Africa, and the dream of African unity, prosperity, and pride still lives on in the hearts of millions. Mali's story is not just about the past. It is a reminder that Africa was never a passive land waiting to be discovered. It was home to empires, ideas, and wealth that shaped the world. And today, as Africa rises once again, economically, culturally, and politically, perhaps it's time to remember what was once possible, to teach our children not just about slavery and struggle, but about kings who ruled with wisdom, cities that shone with knowledge, and a time when Africa wasn't behind, but ahead. This was the Mali Empire, the African empire that was once richer than all of Europe combined. And its story is far from over.